So now this goes back some also into Jewish history, into the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. So if you look at Proverbs and some of the Psalms, Ecclesiastes, you start seeing in Job, you start seeing wisdom referred to as if it is a being.
Right.
And so during the intertestamental periods, this sort of picks up. John is also sort of not buying into, but he's grabbing some of that concept along with this Greek idea of logos to say that the wisdom of the world is embodied. So 104:2 in Psalm says, "O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. In wisdom you have made them all." And so again, wisdom is included in the creative process, and so you kind of see this embodiment. And so those are kind of merged together with him. Now, there's some neat things about John, and particularly the prologue, that I love. We celebrate around here the shortest night of the year.
Right. Right.
We have a service for people who have lost.
Yeah. Service of Healing and Light held on every year now on December 21st, on the shortest night of the year. Or no, the longest night of the
year. And we chose that because originally that was when they started trying to look at when do you have Christmas, because we don't really know when Jesus was actually born. It doesn't say an exact date.
Right.
So we kind of go back, and the early church was trying to figure out how to put things together, and so they wanted it to hit on the shortest night of the year. And so they were close. They were 4 days off. They were very close, but they got close. But the reason, and I'm sure you know this, the reason they wanted it on that shortest day of the year goes back to John chapter 1.
Right.
The light is overcoming the darkness. From Christmas Day on, the darkness diminishes.
Right.
The light gets bigger.
Yeah.
And so the early church really begins to play off of this. And you see the Logos concept happening also. There's, O come, Emmanuel. One of the verses of it says, "O come, thou wisdom from on high, and order all things far and nigh." That's the Logos theology embodied in a very, I can't remember how far back that one goes, but it's a very early hymn. I think for us it means something pretty important. There's a choice. Either everything in the world is accidental, it's all random, or there's an underlying principle, a reason, a purpose, a logic, and a wisdom that was put here by our Creator and in the created order. And I think we all, in our day, we face that same choice.
Right.
It was completely all random, or somewhere, somehow, there is a logos, an order, a purpose that drives our lives and drives the world. And it's an act of faith that you have to take. And John was very clear where he landed on that.
Right.
But he understood that ordering principle was Jesus Christ.
And sometimes it's not until, it's like with the with the framing of a house, you don't really see the framework of a house after it's already been built. And it's not until you go into a wall that you see where the studs are and how the house is actually put together and things like that. I think so often for us, as we're living in it in the moment, we don't see the order of things. We don't see that ordering nature of God that's still with us. It's not a detached God that sort of set the world at work and moved away.
Right.
That understanding. And it's not the randomness idea that the world just sort of accidentally happens. That's not at work. But it's not sometimes until years down the road that we look in the rearview mirror of our life and we look backwards and we see how the ordering principles were there.
Yeah.
How the framework was there that was holding us together.
We just had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the the deists of the 18th century, 17th century believed that God created the world and set it kind of like a clock and let it start ticking.
Yeah.
But John doesn't agree with that.
No.
Because in 14 he says, the ordering principle became flesh and didn't from a distance watch the world tick away, but the literal Greek says through his tent with us. I mean, it's like when you go camping, you can let the kids sleep in the backyard as long as I can stay in the house, which is my philosophy of camping. If you want to sleep in, that's great. Here's a phone, call me if something goes wrong. But if you're really going to sleep with the kid, I mean, if you're really going to make it a camping experience, everybody's in the tent and you live through the ordeal.
Right.
The Word became flesh. The Logos, through his tent with us, knows our every experience, not watching us from a distance, going, oh, look at that. But as like the advocate, is with us every moment and every step of the way.
Well, I mean, that's John helping us to understand Jesus in the role of the suffering servant. You're not the suffering servant if you're not with the people.
Yeah.
If you're not there, if the Word doesn't become flesh and dwell among us, then it is very detached. But instead, he throws his tent with us. He is experiencing day in, day out what we're experiencing. And so we see that lived out in John's gospel because we see the emotion of Jesus in John's gospel. We see Jesus in the 14th and 15th chapter where we were introduced to the Paraclete, the advocate. We see him at the Last Supper in anguish as he's talking to his disciples and he's telling. We see him praying the prayer and just worrying about his disciples, wanting them to stay together and knowing it's going to be hard. And we see him in the garden. We see all the emotions of Jesus in John's gospel because he's not detached from us. He becomes flesh. The Word, the ordering structure is there with us every day and knows what we're going through. And there's a power in that sometimes we overlook and sometimes we only see in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely.
But there's a power in that.
And so for John, who was very Jewish, he's taking in the beginning and he's starting to move it toward a little bit different understanding from what Jewish people understood. And really it's a theistic, he's taking this theistic God, but he's starting to introduce the concept of the incarnation, and that this incarnate God is the creator, but he's also with us right here.
Right.
And so John is changing that for his community, helping them understand the world in different ways.
And he's tying Jesus, helping them understand Jesus as part of that Godhead.
Yeah.
So that in the Jewish world saw themselves, yes, they were monotheists. They only worshiped one God. While everyone else, the Baal gods of the Old Testament, the gods of Asherah and these were numerous. In the days of John, you have the Greek gods, you have the Roman gods.
Sure.
The Jewish people have always been monotheists. From the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And so that's true. But they were also henotheists, meaning that God was the God of their tribe. God was their God. I will be your people kind of thing. You will be my people. I will be your God. It was that relationship. And here John is tying Jesus into this, who comes that everyone who believes in him can be saved. Everyone who believes in him are now his sheep and can go in and out and find pasture. He is our good shepherd, etc. And so now it's still henotheism, but God is the God of all who call on him through Jesus.
Yes.
And so that framework now we see, just like your drying rack, we see it shift a little bit in the way it looks, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still the same. It's still the same structure.
It's the same God.
Same God.
And we're just understanding a little bit different nuances.
Right.
So, but I think at the end of the day, for me, it's this amazing thought that God, the one that created it all, the one that structured it, the one that gives texture and support and the whole background of creation, loved us enough to die for us and to be with us.
Right.
And that's worth giving on.
Absolutely.